Alright, so now I have a nice dry, warm colored background. I've taped it to a board just so that I can kind of hold it up and really show you what I'm doing without the video moving around as much. So I had started and then decided this is a better idea to go over top of this is dry now, right? With my oil pastels, I'm going to start to draw the foreground and the middle ground. What I originally painted is going to be the sky, and the nice thing about this is it's going to automatically fill in, right? If I make some mountains here, the sky's going to go ahead and fill in between those mountains. So we got to have some fun with painting, and we'll also have our entire paper covered this way for us to make our landscape on top. I'm going to stick with a warm color, so I had a warm color background, and I want you to choose either warm or cool colors again now for the middle and foreground. So the foreground is the stuff that's up front, closest to you. So the things that are closest to you are going to be at the bottom of the page, and they're also going to cover up the things that come in behind them, right? So if things are overlapping, whatever's up front will cover up what comes behind it. So if I tree right here, it's going to cover up the mountain behind it. And then, like I said, what we have painted will be the sky. So we can add things to the sky if you'd like a hot air balloon or a plane. Just because it's a landscape doesn't mean we can't have other objects in it, or even a person or an animal. So that's a personal choice. So you could use your imagination, or you could look at maybe some of the photographs. If you have photographs either that you've taken, we don't want to, I won't be able to do that very edge there, which is fine. I'll cut that off eventually. We don't want to copy somebody else's artwork completely, right? We want this to be your own. So maybe you could get some ideas from places you've seen on TV, places you've actually visited, your own backyard, by looking out the windows wherever you are, and by, of course, photographs and other artists' work that might inspire you. So this is going to be my foreground. I'm going to put some trees, I think, on here that are having fall leaves fall all over the ground. And so let me do that with a kind of a light brown that I can go over. And since it's fall, I'm going to go ahead and just have these be trees that don't have a whole lot of leaves left on them, but they will have some. And so trees, if you think about it, right, they're not usually a stick, but they'll have a thickness to them. And I'm going right over top of that oil pastel, because now my tree is coming closer, right? It's starting before the edge of that little hill or the flat plane that I have in the front of my oil pastel. And so tree branches, next time you have a chance to look, they get bigger where they connect to the tree, right? Also, the base of the tree is usually the widest part, so down here will be a little bit wider than up here. And these are just general rules about how trees grow. And that can be helpful because it's going to make your drawing look more realistic. Maybe you want your drawing to look like you have an invented tree, right? Could grow from the sky if you really wanted. That's pretty okay with people doing things that are not necessarily the way we usually see them or think about them. I just am going to make mine somewhat realistic because that's what I feel like doing. Alright, so I will be adding some leaves. But I just want to give you this idea of foreground, right? Something in front, and then how I could maybe draw some things in behind that. So I could make another tree, I could have an animal over here. We are not going to get to a finished point, I wouldn't think, today. I'll use a little bit darker yellow. I actually kind of have maybe, I don't know, just some rolling hills in the background. Figure that one out later. So in behind, I'm gonna draw a bunch of leaves up here, then I have a little bit of hills in behind it. And I could have the rest be sky if I wanted, or I could have some mountains off in the distance, or I could have trees, right, growing maybe on another plane in behind that. So I think maybe that's what I'll do, is go with this kind of another set of hills, almost like pre-mountains, right? So not quite mountains. I'm gonna have a lot of sky, and I'm okay with that. You usually don't want to cut your page right in half, and mine almost is, but that's okay. I'll just add a little bit more height to some of these places. And I'm going to have my trees, they're going to be smaller, right? So here's a tree. I'm going to have smaller trees in the background, and they're going to be evergreen trees, some of them. So I'll go ahead and just kind of start to pencil those in. And you're not going to be able to see a lot of details in them because they're going to be pretty far away. So again, just making triangles. I can go over top of here then, right? Just kind of make a loose ground, or maybe I have some evergreen trees growing in. Now, obviously, this is a cool color. So my picture is going to be primarily warm colors. But it doesn't mean I can't add a little splash maybe of something else, right? So now I'm going to just kind of really put some treetops in there pretty quickly. And so this is going to be a nice tree covered area back here. I will work on filling that in a little bit later. So for these parts, I could add more trees. I could just have it be like red hills in the background. It doesn't have to be completely realistic, as we've already mentioned. I do want to go back in here and I want to put some really abstract kind of leaves. So I'm just making, you can kind of see it. Let me pick a different color. Orange is fine. Yellows, of course, are good. And a little brown. And I could still put a few touches of green in my leaves. So you'll really be able to see it if I do a green one. And really just making this organic shape, right? And you could make yours more detailed if you wanted. And just kind of going around and adding where I think there would be some leaves. So you can, of course, take your time more than I do, right? This one's really from imagination because I am not looking at a tree right now. And so I'm just kind of getting this idea of all these different colors. And now I kind of like the idea of adding some orange to my tree itself, right? So being a little bit inventive, really playing around with this idea of warm colors. And I do like that better. It's just kind of fun. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to put a lot more leaves on the tree and start to spatter some leaves on the ground and maybe fill in these hills a little bit, and I'll show you an update there. But this is not done, right? And so figuring out when an artwork is done is sometimes a little bit tricky, but there are parts that definitely don't look finished, like this and the sky. They look too similar yet, right? So I need to figure out how am I going to fill this part in, and how am I going to make this look different or the same. I want it to look different than these hills in front of it. What am I going to do to really make that part look complete? And then, of course, the foreground is where I should have the most details. So I definitely don't want to leave that plain.